to hand you over to Brussels, where that live press conference is taking place.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you in advance for your attention. I would just like to begin by saying that I was very happy indeed to welcome to our institution here, and on behalf of President Juncker of the Commission, to welcome David Davis. President Juncker himself wanted to personally greet him, and the United Kingdom delegation which accompanied him. I'm very pleased to meet the press now, side by side with David Davis, for this first joint press conference. Just to say, to start with, that this was a very important first session, an opening session, of course, and I would just add that it was also very useful.
Ladies and gentlemen, this first session was useful, indeed, to start off on the right foot as the clock is ticking. And it was useful for me to sit down with my counterpart, David Davis. I look forward to working closely with you, David, during this negotiation. Today, we agreed on dates. We agreed on organization, and we agreed on priorities for the negotiation. In the first step, we will deal with the most pressing issues. We must lift the uncertainty caused by Brexit. We want to make sure that the withdrawal of UK happens in an orderly manner. Then, in the second step, we will scope our future partnership. We also agreed on how we will structure our talks. Our aim is to have 1 week of negotiations every month and use the time in between to work on proposals and exchange them. In the first step, the negotiation rounds will be broken down into 3 groups: citizen rights, the single financial settlement, and other separation issues. These groups will report back to their respective principals during each negotiation week. David Davis and I, as chief EU negotiator, will discuss the issues together, tackle difficulties, lift obstacles. We agreed that our closest collaborators, Olly Robbins and Sabine Vaillant, will start a dialogue on Ireland. The protection of the Good Friday Agreement and the maintenance of the common travel area are the most urgent issues to discuss. We also agreed on the importance of the timing for this first phase. Our objective is to agree on the main principles of the key challenges for the UK's withdrawals as soon as possible. This includes citizens' rights, the single financial settlement, and the question of the borders, in particular in Ireland. The European Council, under the chairmanship of the President Tusk, can then decide on whether we can show sufficient progress or not, and we can move to scoping the future relationship on trade and other matters. Mesdames et Messieurs, aujourd'hui nous avons donc commencé à discuter de ces 3 sujets clés
discussing these 3 key issues as part of the mandate entrusted to me by the 27 member states in the European Council. We have to commit ourselves now mutually to guarantee rights to citizens on either side of the channel, that they can continue their lives as in the past. We have to clear the accounts, and we have to honour our mutual financial commitments. We also have to find solutions to maintaining all the commitments of the Good Friday Agreement. And it is by lifting uncertainties around these issues that we will lay the foundation and create the climate of trust which will enable us to build a new partnership. In leaving the European Union, as the United Kingdom has done in exercising its sovereignty, the United Kingdom will no longer enjoy the same rights and advantages as EU member states. I believe, though, that it is very much in our joint interest to build a new partnership between the 27 and the United Kingdom, and I'm convinced that this new partnership will contribute to sustainable stability on our continent. We, the 27, with the EU institutions, are united in our negotiating stance and in our efforts to achieve this goal. But the 27 also agree to continue reforming, moving forward together.
Ladies and gentlemen, for both the EU and the UK, a fair deal is possible and far better than no deal. That is what I said to David today. That is why we will work all the time with the UK and never against the UK. There will be no hostility on my side. I will display a constructive attitude firmly based on the interest and support of the 27. And I will all the time seek the continued support of the European Parliament in close cooperation with President Tajani and Guy Verhofstadt. Let me end by quoting Jean Monnet in French. Jean Monnet, à qui on demandait
Jean Monnet, when he was asked whether he was optimistic or pessimistic, answered as follows, and I can fully sign up to what he said. And I say that in all modesty and with all due respect to this great European and founding father of the European Union. He answered, I'm neither optimistic nor pessimistic, I am determined.
We are determined.
Thank you, Michel. The audience will discover at the end of what I have to say that we even coordinate our quotations. Firstly, I think we should start by recognising the very productive discussions that we've had today. And I've been encouraged by the constructive approach that both sides have taken. We've laid a solid foundation for future discussions with an ambitious but eminently achievable timetable. It was clear from the opening that both of us want to achieve the best possible outcome and the strongest possible partnership, one that works for the UK and for the EU. And we agreed that we stand a much greater chance of success if our teams work together, as that's been demonstrated today. Nowhere is this more true than on the important issues around the rights of citizens, where I'm happy to report there is much common ground. Ever since the referendum, I have been clear that my first priority is to provide certainty to European Union citizens living in the United Kingdom and to UK citizens resident in the European Union. And I know Michel shares that aspiration too. So now that the negotiations have started, we are determined to get on with the job and deliver that certainty as soon as possible. The Prime Minister will later this week update European leaders on the UK's approach to this issue at the European Council. We will then publish a detailed paper outlining our offer on Monday, which I believe will form the right basis on which to reach agreement. I'll also be briefing members of other parties on Privy Council terms, as well as briefing Parliament generally. In addition to our discussion on citizens' rights, we have reached agreement on how we'll structure the talks over the coming months. Michel and I will meet every 4 weeks, bringing our teams together for a number of days at a time. We hope this regular rhythm will help us to progress our discussions across the full range of issues very quickly. We've also established a number of technical working groups tasked with driving progress on the all-important detail. These groups of senior experts from both the UK and the EU met for the first time today. They'll support Michel and me by developing creative solutions to challenges we have identified, testing options under consideration and building out the underpinning detail. Today marks the start of a journey for the United Kingdom and for the European Union. There's a long way to go, but we're off to a promising start. We have taken the first critical steps together. Now we have a shared responsibility to deliver quick and substantive progress. Now, as you heard, Michel said that we had a discussion, a brief exchange earlier, about the distinction between being optimistic and being determined. And he gave you Monnet's answer. There's no doubt that the road ahead will at times be challenging, but as Winston Churchill once said, the pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity. The optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty. And so, bridging between Churchill and Monnet, I am certainly a determined optimist. Thank you.
We can now switch to your questions. I will start with Sarah first.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sarah Collins from the Irish Independent and Irish Examiner newspapers. To both Mr. Davis and Monsieur Barnier, the focus so far and what I'm getting from you today is that it's going to be citizens and financial settlement first, with Irish issues pushed a little bit aside to an extent. Can you explain your thinking on that? How do you intend to structure the talks? When we can expect position papers on Ireland? Is it still one of your top priorities? And ultimately, who's responsible for coming up with these flexible and imaginative solutions that are mentioned in the EU guidelines? Thanks.
The first thing to say is I think Ireland's taken, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland have taken more time today than anything else. We discussed two aspects of it. One, of course, is the political sensitivities, which everybody understands. The other is the determination to maintain as near as possible invisible border, so we do not undermine the peace process, do not provide any cause for concern in Northern Ireland. This is a technically difficult issue, but it's one which I'm certain is soluble, although it will probably take us until the end of the process when we've already decided what our customs and free trade arrangements are. But that's why we're starting now. That's why this was initially dealt with by dialogue of the two highest ranking people, the two coordinators in this team. There's no doubt in my mind this is right at the top of the priorities that we need to resolve in this negotiation.
It's not fair to say we've set it aside or left it behind. Far from it. As David has just said, we actually spent a lot of time today setting out the best way to make progress on this. This, after all, is one of the most sensitive issues before us, which was brought home to me a few weeks ago when I was invited by the Taoiseach and by both chambers of the Parliament in Dublin to address this. There is a very, very sensitive political dimension to this. The new Northern Irish executive needs to be set up in a few days' time. At the same time, we have a new government and a new Taoiseach in Dublin. And, of course, there are the ongoing political discussions in London, which we're also following closely. We've actually been in contact on our side with the new Taoiseach team and Elizabeth Varkar, and he'll be meeting President Juncker on Thursday, and I'll be meeting him, the new minister tomorrow in Luxembourg, the new foreign minister. So all this is going to happen, and our ideas haven't changed, with strength and determination to preserve all the dimensions and commitments of the Good Friday Agreement. As I've also said, we want to keep all the dimensions of the common travel area ongoing. The other problem in parallel with that is that without creating a new hard border,
as I've said, at the same time, we have to come up with solutions, especially for goods and services, but in a way that is compliant with the normal rules and integrity of the internal market. So we've got a very sensitive political context. We've got a very clear objective, which is to preserve all the dimensions of the Good Friday Agreement. And we have an awful lot of work to do, bilaterally, and also in coordination with the Dublin government on my side, so that we come up with imaginative and concrete solutions along the lines I've described, and particularly taking into account the single market. So certainly no question of setting this aside or behind the others.
Closer to the mic.
How's that? James Mates from ITV News. Secretary of State, you appear to have agreed in terms of timing, priorities and sequencing to conduct these talks exactly as the EU27 said they were going to be conducted. Is this an early indication of the weakness of your negotiating position and your lack of leverage?
About the talks is not when it starts, it's how it finishes that matter. The UK has been crystal clear about our approach to the negotiations. The withdrawal process cannot be concluded without the future relationship also being taken into account. They should be agreed alongside each other. This is completely consistent with the Council's guidelines that state nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. Of course, there are some issues that we want to tackle as early as possible, most notably citizens' rights, but as you've just heard, Northern Ireland as well. So the position we've agreed today is completely consistent with our long-standing position and what we set out in our Article 50 letter.
Okay, Katja, you need to take the mic.
Secretary of State, when you do get around to talking about the future relationship with the EU and trade relations, what will you be asking for? What kind of Brexit will you be asking for? And can the EU trust that what you ask for today or tomorrow will be what you ask for in a few days' time, considering the political confusion at the moment in the UK? And Monsieur Barnier, si vous me permettiez en anglais, the citizens of the United Kingdom are facing very challenging times at the moment. Just one of their worries is about Brexit and that it really will turn out well. If you could speak to them directly, what would you say to them?
First, the first thing, the position hasn't changed. We have the Lancaster House speech, the two white papers, and the Article 50 letter, all backed up by a manifesto too. And so it's the same as it was before. Because the membership of the single market requires the four freedoms to be obeyed, and we need to bring back to Britain control of our laws and control of our borders, we will be leaving the single market. We'll be seeking to set up a free trade arrangement and a customs agreement. Similarly, we'll be leaving the customs union. The same arguments apply, but also because that's the only way we can develop our free trade arrangements with the rest of the world. And that is a major upside for Britain. So the circumstance has not changed at all.
Je me permets d'ajouter un mot.
Could I just add something in response to that question and the previous question? Article 50 is very clear, and we are in the process of implementing Article 50. It is a very somber moment because the decision taken by the United Kingdom to leave the European Union is a serious decision, and we have to ensure that there is an orderly withdrawal of the United Kingdom, whilst taking into account our future relations. So we're working in stages. In the second phase, once we've seen sufficient progress on the first phase, I mean, the point made by David Davis is important. I think I would echo that. We have Theresa May's letter on the table, and it says that the British government confirms that the United Kingdom wants to leave the European Union, wants to leave the single market, and wants to leave the customs union. Now, and when the time comes, we will be working on that. There are different forms of cooperation between the European Union of 27 and third countries. And in all those scenarios, you have to weigh up the rights and the implications, the conditions. And the United Kingdom knows what the rules are for each of those scenarios and models. Thank you for your question about British citizens. I'd like to say the following. I know many British citizens who live and work in the region where I was an elected representative. I would say this to all European citizens who live and work in the United Kingdom as well. As you know, there are 3.2 million EU citizens in the UK and 1 million British citizens on this side of the Channel. And it's our priority. It's citizens first. We want to find a way of ensuring that their rights are protected. The rights acquired up until the date of withdrawal. We want to protect those rights over time, throughout their lifetime, for them and for their families. And this has to be done on the basis of principles that we have to agree on. It's about reciprocity, it's about continuity, it's about non-discrimination. And we started work on that today in one of the working groups. And the aim of this work is to decide who we're talking about, what type of rights we're talking about, and what type of guarantees we can give them to reassure them. And as of when this protection, these guarantees should be provided. So we await with great interest the paper to be published in the near future by the British government in response to the text that you have, that we published a few days ago. And we will be doing the same in the future to make life easier for you.
Bruno now.
A question for Mr. Davis. In the terms of reference, there are negotiating groups for citizens' rights, financial settlement and other issues, but only a dialogue on Ireland and the border. Is this because of the government's talks with the DUP, or perhaps because of the position taken by some members of the cabinet, such as Philip Hammond, on customs union and single market? And Mr. Barnier, in English, if I may, how confident are you that you'll still have Mr. Davis to talk to over the next 6 months, given the fragility of a British government that has to rely on loyalists in Northern Ireland?
How flattering. Let me deal with that. I mean, I think we've dealt with it once already, but the treatment of the Northern Irish issue, the Republic of Ireland issue, is by no means, in some sense, second class. Just the reverse is being dealt with by the most senior people in the negotiating teams. And we're starting it now, not because, I mean, on citizens, we hope that we can get a reasonably fast resolution, reasonably fast. On Northern Ireland, this will take some considerable time, but it's very complex and very sensitive, and as Michel has already said, it's one we take extremely seriously. It has absolutely nothing to do with any negotiations inside the House of Commons.
Michel.
Let me, on this point of Ireland, just reaffirm the fact that the very fact that we have begun our dialogue today at the highest level and Ollie Robbins, who is British Prime Minister's advisor, and on my side, Sabine Veillant, who is my deputy in these negotiations. I think this shows, in its own right, just how high a priority we put on this issue, given the range of political and technical issues at stake. I think this very much justifies our dialogue. And the dialogue should indeed represent a safeguard to all concerned that we are very much committed to this as a priority. I won't pick up on the issue that was addressed in your first question, which has already been answered, but I would say that the political discussion within the United Kingdom is, of course, very interesting. It's not the only country I follow whose internal politics I follow closely, of course. I'm meeting David Davis yet again today, but I've known him for quite some time. And in fact, we go back to 1995 because we're both European Affairs Ministers of the United Kingdom and France at the time. And we began negotiations for the Amsterdam Treaty at the time. I can perhaps come back to that some other day, if you like. But I am working with the British government and its official representative, David Davis. That's what I can say for my part.
Thomas Meyer.
I'm here. Thomas Meyer, The Standard. I would like to ask you if you have found an agreement on the information policy that we will see here in the next month. You know that the European citizens had concerns not to be well informed about what we have seen in the trade negotiations with the United States and Canada. And we have set new standards here. So could you tell us, how will you do that work? Will you give us orally informations after every round of negotiations here? Will you publish the documents? How will that work? And what role will the European Parliament play in this?
Pouvons chacun avoir notre réponse.
Well, we can each reply to that in our respective ways, and everybody is free to respond as they wish. But my personal point of view, in coordination with President Tusk and President Juncker, our intention is to be fully transparent in a completely unusual way, because it's an unusual negotiation, an extraordinary negotiation. And because of this exceptional dimension, we intend to have as broad and open a debate as possible to make everyone, including your lives, easier. I think you had concrete example of what we might mean a couple of days ago, when we immediately published both position papers on financial settlement and citizens' rights respectively. And I intend to go on doing so. I prefer transparency to leaks. And guide us add.
Au-delà et avec vous, le respect total de votre liberté.
You're of course all free as journalists, but we all together have to understand that this is an exceptional negotiation of huge interest to a lot of people everywhere. I'm going around the 27 member states for the second time, meeting heads of government, business communities, national parliaments, both sides of industry, trade unions, et al. And everywhere I find great awareness of the responsibility and the issues at stake. So a public debate, for me, is very important. It's not something that we want to take a passive attitude towards. We want to be proactive, and that's how we see transparency.
And we are both agreed on that. During the course of the last 10 months, the UK Parliament has questioned the government quite properly, in great detail, on what its aims should be, what its negotiating strategy should be, where it's going, where it wants to take the country. And I and the Prime Minister have given undertakings to ensure that we are as transparent as possible consistent with normal negotiations, more transparent than any other negotiation in modern history. So I think we're in the same place. We take the same view as Michel on this. We want to see the public informed, the public in its widest sense, parliamentarians, the general public, business, trade unions, civic society, all informed by proactive publication of what we are doing, not by leaks or erroneous briefings.
Go ahead.
Peter Foster with the Daily Telegraph. To Mr. Davis first. Mr. Davis, you set up a working group on financial settlement. You said not long ago that the fight over sequencing would be the fight of the summer, but the terms of reference make no reference to trade and no reference to future relationship. Have you given up the argument? Have you lost the argument? And to Mr. Barnier, can you tell us anywhere in these negotiations where you feel you've made a concession to the Brits?
Let me start with just reading you the section from the Article 50 letter the Prime Minister wrote. We will need to discuss how we determine a fair settlement of the United Kingdom's rights and obligations as a departing member state, in accordance with the law and the spirit of the United Kingdom's continuing partnership with the European Union. But we believe it is necessary to agree the terms of our future partnership alongside those of our withdrawal from the European Union. And that's what we see will happen. When we eventually get to the point that the Council decides we've made enough progress, their words, both sets of dialogue will continue, including free trade, not just trade, obviously customs, obviously security, obviously cooperation in all sorts of ways. They'll all continue once we get to that point.
Je confirme ce que vient dire David.
I would like to confirm what David has just said about the two stages. They are clearly defined within my mandate and they make sense, really. They're logical. We need to remain calm. We're talking about an orderly withdrawal first, and that makes sense. It's common sense. It's not just something we're asking for in order to get concessions. It's just the direct consequence of the United Kingdom's decision. Once we have made sufficient progress, and it has to be sufficient concrete progress, I will be the first to assume our responsibility and ask the European Council to open negotiations on scoping in parallel. Obviously, the details of the future relationship is something that will only be concluded after the departure of the United Kingdom. Now, you asked whether there's anywhere where we've made a concession. Well, look, the United Kingdom has decided to leave the European Union. It's not the other way round. The United Kingdom is going to leave the European Union, the single market and the customs union, not the other way round. So we each have to assume our responsibility and the consequences of our decisions. And the consequences are substantial. This is the first thing I said in my first public statement back in November. I talked about the human consequences, the social consequences, the financial, legal, technical, economic and political consequences. Please do not underestimate those consequences, and we will try and reduce the negative impact of those consequences. So I'm not in a frame of mind to make concessions or ask for concessions. It's not about punishment. It's not about revenge. Basically, we are implementing the decision taken by the United Kingdom to leave the European Union and unravel 43 years of patiently built relations. I will do all I can to put emotion to one side and stick to the facts, the figures and the legal basis and work with the United Kingdom to find an agreement in that frame of mind.
This concludes our press conference. Thank you all for your massive presence. Thank you.